"You need a home, and I need a father," said the little black girl, unaware he was a billionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The streets were cold that night, the kind of cold that seemed to settle in your bones, cutting deeper than it had any right to. It was Christmas Eve, but there were no festive lights hanging from the lampposts, no laughter or joy echoing from the homes around the park. The sound of wind rustling through empty branches filled the quiet, interrupted only by the soft sound of a little girl's shoes scraping against the wet sidewalk. Maya, just 7 years old, walked slowly past the rows of towering mansions, clutching the hem of her worn-out jacket to her chest. Her face, framed by wild, tangled curls, was a picture of quiet determination, even as her stomach growled loudly from hunger. She didn't mind, though. She had been hungry before. She was used to it. As she approached a large, imposing iron gate, she paused, her breath catching in her throat. There was something about this house. Its cold, marble walls, the grand columns that seemed to stretch toward the sky, that both frightened and fascinated her. She hadn't seen a place like this in all her years. But she wasn't here for the house itself. She was here for something else. There was a man she had seen through the windows before, a man who always seemed to be alone, who never smiled. He wasn't like the other people who lived in the neighborhood, always rushing about, their lives filled with fancy cars and jewelry. No, this man, he looked sad, like someone who had forgotten how to smile. Maya wasn't sure why she thought he could help, but something told her to try. Maybe it was because she had no one else to turn to. She stepped up to the gate, trying not to let her fear show, and she whispered, "Please, I need a home." But the words came out softer than she expected, as if even the wind was afraid to hear them. Inside the house, Ethan Caldwell, a billionaire and successful entrepreneur, sat at his desk, his mind lost in numbers, contracts, and deadlines. His life had always been filled with plans to grow his business, to climb higher on the corporate ladder, but it had never been filled with something as simple as happiness. As he gazed at the papers in front of him, his thoughts wandered to his past. He had always been alone. His wife had left years ago, and his daughter, well, she had grown distant. His phone buzzed, a reminder of the meeting he was about to attend, but as he got up to leave, a soft, distant voice reached his ears. It was barely a whisper, but it was enough to stop him in his tracks. "Please, I need a father." The words were soft, like the wind, but they hit him harder than anything else had in a long time. Confused, Ethan walked toward the window and peered out. His eyes widened as he saw the small figure standing in front of the gate. The little girl with the dark curls. "What is she doing here?" he muttered to himself. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and stepped outside, determined to find out what was going on. As he approached the gate, Maya turned toward him, her wide eyes filled with fear and hope, but mostly hope. Ethan paused for a moment, staring at the small girl who had somehow found her way into his life, without warning. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Maya shook her head. "I'm not lost. I just need a father. I do not know what to say," he thought as he looked at the little girl standing in front of the large, imposing gate. Her words had pierced him in a way nothing else ever had. "I just need a father." His mind raced, but his heart felt heavy. There she was, standing in front of him, this small, fragile girl with no place to go, asking for something he didn't know if he was ready to give. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, so innocent, so full of hope. He had no idea what to do, but something inside of him stirred. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had to act. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "Come on," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Let's get you out of the cold." Maya's eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and relief as she took a cautious step forward, then another, and before she knew it, she was walking beside him, following him through the large gate and up to the mansion. The house loomed over them like a giant, a place that she could never imagine belonging to someone like her. She had never been inside anything so grand, and she wasn't sure if she should feel scared or amazed. As they entered the house, the warmth hit her immediately, The sudden shift from the cold outside to the warmth of the mansion was overwhelming, and for a brief moment, she closed her eyes, savoring the heat. Ethan led her inside, showing her to the living room where a fire crackled in the fireplace. The soft glow from the flames cast long shadows across the room. He asked her to sit on the couch, but she hesitated, unsure of where she belonged in a place like this. "Do you want some hot cocoa?" Ethan asked, trying to break the ice. Maya nodded silently, still unsure of how to behave in this strange new world. Ethan went to the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of cocoa. He handed one to Maya, and as she took it, their fingers brushed for just a second. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes, something soft, something human. Ethan cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "So, why are you out here all alone?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maya stared into her cocoa, not wanting to meet his eyes. She didn't know how to explain everything that had happened. "My mom, she passed away," she said quietly. "And my dad, he doesn't care about me. I've been trying to find somewhere safe." Her words were so simple, yet they hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, a mixture of sorrow and guilt. He had everything: money, power, success, but he never truly had anything that mattered. He never had someone to care for, someone to love. And now, here was this little girl, asking him for something he didn't know if he could give. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know. I never should have assumed." Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide, but there was no judgment in them. There was just a quiet understanding. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "It's just how things are." Ethan nodded, his heart heavy. He couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change, but he didn't know where to begin. He had never been a father, never even had a family of his own. But something about this girl, something about her innocence, her resilience, made him feel like he had to try. "You're safe here, okay?" he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't have to worry about anything tonight. Just get some rest. We'll figure things out tomorrow." Maya nodded slowly, still unsure of what was happening but comforted by the warmth, both physical and emotional, that surrounded her. She had never been given so much care, so much attention in her life, and she didn't know how to handle it. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. She felt that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Ethan watched her as she curled up on the couch, her small frame trembling slightly as she sipped her cocoa. He wanted to do more, to give her the world, but he didn't know how. He couldn't even remember the last time he felt this uncertain about anything. As he turned to leave the room, he caught a glimpse of her face, so young, so full of potential, so vulnerable, and something inside him shifted. He couldn't turn his back on her. He couldn't walk away. He had to do something. Something more than just provide her with a warm place to stay for the night. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he had a purpose. He just didn't know yet how far that purpose would take him. "I cannot imagine what to say," Ethan thought, standing in the kitchen as Maya sat quietly at the table, her cocoa long finished, her small hands resting on the edge of the cup. The house was silent except for the soft crackling of the fire in the living room. It was so strange, this stillness. His house was always filled with noise, with phones ringing, meetings, business calls, but tonight was different. Maya was different. She wasn't asking for anything extravagant, nothing out of the ordinary, just a place to be safe. And that request, so simple and pure, had shaken him more than he could have ever imagined. "You can stay here for as long as you need," Ethan said, turning to face her, his voice softer than it had been all night. Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She had never known anything other than the streets, the cold, the constant fear of not knowing where her next meal would come from. But in this room, in this warm house with the fire flickering and the soft, thick carpet under her feet, she felt something unfamiliar: hope. It made her heart race, and she didn't know how to handle it. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice so small it almost cracked. Ethan nodded, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I'm sure. You don't have to worry about anything here." But even as he said it, a part of him was unsure. He wasn't equipped to be a father. He wasn't even sure what it meant to be a father. But there was something about Maya, her resilience, her strength despite everything she had been through, that made him want to try. He had spent so many years building his empire, making deals, controlling everything around him. But nothing had ever felt as important as this moment, this decision. For once, he wasn't thinking about profits or goals. He was thinking about the child sitting in front of him, the child who had nothing but the clothes on her back and a hope that somehow, someone would care enough to help her. Maya's eyes darted around the room, taking in the luxury she had never known. The chandeliers, the expensive furniture, the large windows that let in the soft glow of the streetlights. It was all so much, too much. She wanted to feel comfortable, wanted to believe that she could fit into this world, but it felt impossible. "You can sleep here tonight," Ethan said, motioning to the guest bedroom. "There's a bed, blankets. You'll be safe." He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the uncertainty, and for a moment, he wondered if she even believed she deserved to be safe. Maya stood up, her small frame moving toward the guest room slowly, as though testing the waters. She stopped just inside the doorway, her eyes scanning the room as though expecting it to disappear. She had never had a room of her own, never had a bed that wasn't on the floor, never had sheets that weren't thin and worn. She touched the soft duvet, then ran her fingers along the edge of the nightstand, feeling the smooth wood. It was all so different from what she had known. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, watching her, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them. He wasn't her father. He didn't even know what it meant to be a father. But somehow, tonight, he had made a choice. A choice to open his home, his heart, and offer something he had never offered before: hope. "You can stay as long as you need," Ethan said again, his voice quieter this time. "You're safe here." Maya nodded slowly, still not sure if she could believe it. She had never been safe. Never had anyone care enough to offer her safety. But maybe, just maybe, things were different now. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, unsure of what else to say. He wasn't a father, and he didn't know how to act like one. But he was trying, and that was enough for now. "I'll be just down the hall if you need anything," he said before turning to leave the room. As he walked away, he couldn't help but think about how much his life had changed in the span of a few hours. He had opened his door to a stranger, to a child who had nothing. And yet, in that moment, he realized he had something now. He had the chance to change a life, to make a difference. It was more than he had ever expected to find. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something stir inside him. A purpose. A reason to do more than just live for himself. "I know this isn't real," Maya thought as she lay under the soft blankets in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. She had never been allowed to have a room like this before. A real bed, with plush pillows and a duvet that smelled faintly of lavender. The sheets were crisp, clean, and so soft. Her small fingers curled around the fabric, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax. She had spent years on the move, never staying in one place long enough to feel settled. But tonight was different. Ethan had promised her safety, a place where she could stay, and that promise felt like a warm blanket wrapping around her. She had never felt anything like this before, and part of her was afraid to believe it. She didn't want to get her hopes up only to have them dashed again. But as the soft hum of the house surrounded her, she let herself drift into sleep, knowing that she was safe, at least for tonight. Ethan stood outside the door, his hand on the handle, his heart heavy with a sense of responsibility he had never felt before. It had been a long time since he had opened his life to someone else, and it had been even longer since he had opened his heart. Maya had come to him with nothing, and in return, he had offered her a chance, something he wasn't sure he could offer to anyone else. He had the money, the success, the life that so many people would envy, but none of that seemed to matter now. What mattered was the small girl sleeping behind that door, someone who had nothing but the clothes on her back and the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who cared. His thoughts wandered to the future, to what it would mean for him to take on this responsibility. He had never been a father, never been asked to be one. But something about Maya, something about her vulnerability and strength, made him want to try. He had spent years building an empire, chasing success, but now he found himself wondering if all that really mattered. He had reached the top, but he had never once stopped to consider what it was all for. What was the point of it all if you didn't have someone to share it with? What was the point of building a future if you didn't have anyone to pass it down to? Ethan sighed and stepped away from the door. He didn't have the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let Maya face this world alone. He had spent so many years shutting people out, but now, with her in his life, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could start opening up. The next morning, Ethan woke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the soft clinking of dishes in the kitchen. He groggily rubbed his eyes and checked the time. It was late, but he had never been one to wake up early. He was about to get out of bed when he heard the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. He froze for a moment, wondering if it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But when he heard the sound again, louder this time, he quickly threw on a robe and walked out of his room. He found Maya standing at the end of the hallway, her small figure barely visible in the dim light of the morning. "Good morning," she said softly, a small smile on her face. Ethan smiled back, his heart lifting a little. "Good morning, Maya. How did you sleep?" Maya shrugged, looking down at her feet. "I slept good," she said, her voice quiet. It's so different here." Ethan nodded, understanding. He knew it had to be overwhelming for her. This was all new, a world she had never seen before. He had to remind himself that it wouldn't be easy. There was no roadmap for this kind of thing. "It's different for me, too," he said. "But I'm glad you're here." Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide, and for a moment, Ethan could see the uncertainty in them. "Do you really mean that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You really want me here?" Ethan paused, taken aback by her question. He could see the fear behind her eyes, the fear that came from years of rejection and abandonment. And it hit him in a way he wasn't expecting. "I do," he said firmly, his voice steady. "You're safe here. You don't have to worry about anything." Maya hesitated for a moment, then nodded, the faintest glimmer of relief crossing her face. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." Ethan stepped forward, kneeling down to her level. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice soft. "This is what families do for each other." He reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, and in that moment, something inside of him shifted. He had never thought of himself as a family man. But as he looked into Maya's eyes, he realized that this was a chance to change, to be the person he never thought he could be. "Let's have breakfast," he said, standing up and gesturing toward the kitchen. "We'll figure it all out together." Maya's face brightened slightly, and she nodded, following him into the kitchen. As they sat down together for breakfast, Ethan couldn't help but feel like this was the start of something new. Something he never saw coming, but something he couldn't walk away from. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. Maya wasn't just a child he was helping, she was a part of his life now, and that was something he wasn't ready to let go of. "I never thought it could feel like this," Maya thought as she sat on the porch, watching the rain gently fall from the sky. The house behind her was quiet, the only sound the occasional gust of wind rustling through the trees. She had been here for a week now, and in that short time, her life had already begun to feel like it was shifting in ways she hadn't expected. She had never imagined that she would wake up in a warm house every morning, that she would have meals waiting for her, or that she would have someone who actually cared, telling her she was safe. Maya had spent so many years alone, or at least feeling alone. Even when she had her mother and father, there had always been this distance, this feeling that they weren't truly there for her. But with Ethan, it was different. She could feel the care in his actions, in the way he looked at her, in the way he asked if she was okay every time she seemed out of sorts. It felt unreal, like a dream she was afraid to wake up from. But she didn't want to think about that now. For once, she wanted to let herself believe that she was exactly where she needed to be. She could feel the warmth from the fire inside, and though it wasn't yet the holiday season, it felt like the world outside had given her a gift she never expected, a chance. "Hey Maya, you alright?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to find him standing in the doorway, a cup of hot cocoa in his hand. He had a soft smile on his face, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. She hadn't realized how long she had been sitting there, lost in her thoughts. "Yeah," she said softly, standing up and brushing off her jeans. "Just thinking." Ethan nodded and walked over to her, handing her the cup of cocoa. "You've been spending a lot of time out here," he said, his voice light. But there was an underlying tone of concern that made Maya feel like he was genuinely worried about her. "You sure you're all right?" Maya hesitated, unsure of how to explain everything that had been swirling around in her mind. She had been trying to figure out how she felt about everything. The house, the meals, the constant kindness from Ethan. It was a lot to process. But she didn't want to seem ungrateful, not when he had done so much for her. I'm just not used to it, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Used to what? Ethan asked, a frown pulling at his brows. Used to people being nice to me, Maya said, her words coming out more honestly than she expected. Used to people caring enough to actually help. Ethan's expression softened. You don't have to get used to it, he said, stepping closer and placing a hand on her shoulder. This is how it's supposed to be. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Maya felt a tightness in her chest, and for a moment, she almost couldn't breathe. She had spent so many years thinking she had to do everything on her own, thinking that nobody would care, that hearing Ethan say those words felt like someone had just taken a weight off her shoulders. She didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded, feeling the warmth of the cocoa in her hands. I just don't want to mess this up, Maya whispered. Ethan smiled, his voice reassuring. You're not going to mess it up, he said. You're here now, and that's what matters. We'll figure everything else out as we go. Maya felt a rush of relief wash over her, the tightness in her chest easing. She had been holding on to so much for so long, trying to figure everything out on her own. But now, for the first time, she didn't have to. She didn't have to worry about where her next meal was coming from or whether she would have a place to sleep that night. She was here, and for once, she could let herself relax. They stood there for a moment in silence, just watching the rain fall, the warmth of the house surrounding them. It was strange to think about how different her life was now, how much had changed in such a short time. And yet, it also felt right. She didn't know where this path would take her, but she was starting to believe that it might just lead her somewhere good. Let's go inside, Ethan said after a while, his voice breaking the stillness. We can watch a movie or something. It's been a long day. Maya nodded, a smile tugging at her lips for the first time that day. That sounds good. As they walked back inside, Ethan led her to the living room where the fire crackled softly. Maya settled down on the couch, feeling the warmth of the fire spread through her as Ethan turned on the TV. It wasn't much, just a simple movie, something to pass the time. But for Maya, it felt like more than enough. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged somewhere, like she had a place to call her own. And maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that this wasn't just a dream. It was real. I'm still not sure how I ended up here, Maya thought as she sat on the edge of the couch, her legs crossed beneath her. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that made her feel like she had all the time in the world to think. It had been 2 weeks since she'd first arrived at Ethan's house, and every day felt like a new beginning. The bed she had slept in that first night no longer felt strange to her. The kitchen, where she helped Ethan cook dinner sometimes, now felt like a space she belonged in. Even the living room, with its comfortable chairs and the gentle hum of the air conditioning, had become familiar. She wasn't used to familiarity. Not like this. And maybe that's what scared her the most. What if this wasn't real? What if one day, she would wake up and find that it had all been a dream? Ethan was different. He was always there when she needed him, offering her food when she was hungry, talking to her like she was just as important as anyone else. But Maya had seen enough in her short life to know that people like him didn't last forever. Eventually, they'd move on, forget about her, just like the others. But even as that thought crossed her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. You okay? Ethan's voice pulled her out of her thoughts, and she looked up to see him standing in the doorway, a soft smile on his face. Maya nodded, forcing a smile of her own. Yeah, just thinking. Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying her for a moment. He had grown so accustomed to seeing her quiet and thoughtful, her eyes distant as she tried to make sense of everything. He knew she wasn't used to kindness, wasn't used to being cared for the way he had been caring for her. It wasn't something he had planned, but now that it had happened, he couldn't imagine going back. You sure? He asked, his voice gentle. Maya hesitated, then shrugged, looking down at her hands. I don't really know what to do, she admitted. I've never had this much. Ethan stepped into the room, sitting down beside her. It's okay not to know what to do, he said. You don't have to figure everything out all at once. Maya nodded, but her heart still felt heavy. She wasn't used to having time to think about things, to wonder what came next. She had always just moved forward, one step at a time, because that was all she could do. But now, with Ethan, she had time to breathe, time to dream, and that terrified her. What if the dreams she was starting to have were just fantasies, things that weren't meant for people like her? Do you ever feel like you're not supposed to have this? She asked quietly, not sure where the words were coming from. Ethan looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? Like this house, Maya said, gesturing around the room. This life. All of it. It feels like it's not for me. Like I'm not supposed to be here. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth. Ethan's heart tightened. He had seen that look in her eyes before, the fear that came from not knowing where you belonged, from thinking that maybe you didn't belong anywhere. He reached over, placing a hand on her shoulder, and gave her a small, reassuring squeeze. Maya, this is your home now, he said softly. You're not a visitor here. You belong. You're part of this family, and that's not going to change. Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had never had anyone say that to her before, not with so much certainty. But I don't know how to be part of a family, she whispered. I don't know what that means. Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. That's okay. We'll figure it out together. It doesn't have to be perfect. Maya felt a weight lift off her chest. It was the first time in a long time that someone had made her feel like she was allowed to be part of something good. Maybe she didn't know how to be part of a family yet, but for the first time, she wasn't so afraid of trying. Over the next few days, things began to shift in small ways. Maya started to join Ethan in the kitchen, helping him cook meals, even learning how to make pancakes. Ethan had never been much of a cook himself, but Maya's presence in the kitchen made everything feel less lonely. He could see the change in her, how her shoulders were less tense, how her smile came more easily now, even if it was still faint. And as she helped set the table one evening, she glanced over at him and said, "Maybe I can stay here forever." The words felt like a promise to both of them, one that neither of them had dared to make out loud before. Ethan looked at her, his heart full. "I hope you do," he said quietly. "I really do." The days stretched into weeks, and though the outside world remained uncertain, inside the walls of this house, there was peace. Maya still had moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if this life could really be hers, but every time those doubts crept in, Ethan was there, reminding her that she was wanted, that she was enough. And slowly, she started to believe it. The rain had stopped by the time dinner was ready, and the soft glow of the dining room lights made everything feel warm and safe. As they sat down at the table together, Maya realized something. She didn't need to know everything about how this would work out. She didn't need to have it all figured out. For the first time in her life, she just needed to be here, right now, with the people who cared for her, and that was enough. I never thought I'd be in this position, Maya thought, looking out the window as the sun began to set. The glow from the setting sun spilled through the large windows of Ethan's living room, casting a warm, golden light across the room. She had been living in his house for over a month now, and every day felt like a new beginning. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to the constant warmth, the security, the feeling of being cared for. And it wasn't just the physical warmth of the house, it was the emotional warmth too. Ethan had given her more than just a roof over her head. He had given her something she had never known: stability. She still didn't know how to navigate this new life she found herself in, but she knew one thing for sure: it was better than anything she had ever imagined. Yet, as the days went by, something nagged at the back of her mind, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. It was the fear that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't real. That one day, Ethan would wake up and realize he didn't need her here anymore. That he would regret opening his home, his heart, to her. She pushed the thought away, but it always lingered, just beneath the surface. Ethan noticed the change in her. Over the past few weeks, Maya had become quieter, more withdrawn. She still helped around the house, still spent time with him in the evenings, but something was different. It was as if she was waiting for the other shoe to drop, always keeping a part of herself distant from him, like she was preparing for the moment when everything would fall apart. He hated seeing her like this. He could tell she was still carrying the weight of the past, the weight of everything she had been through before coming to live with him, and it tore him up inside. "Maya," Ethan said one evening after dinner, when he found her sitting alone on the porch, staring out into the darkening sky. "Can we talk?" Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide, but she didn't say anything. He sat down next to her, giving her space but staying close enough that she could feel his presence. "I've noticed that you've been a little quieter lately," Ethan continued, his voice gentle. Is everything okay? Maya hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She didn't want to worry him, but she also couldn't ignore the feeling in her chest that had been growing for days. She started, but her voice trailed off. She wasn't sure how to explain what she was feeling. She wasn't sure how to explain the doubt that had been creeping into her mind. I'm afraid, Maya whispered, her voice so soft that Ethan almost didn't hear it. Afraid of what? Ethan asked, his voice full of concern. Afraid that one day, you'll wake up and realize you don't need me here anymore, Maya said, her words coming out in a rush. I don't want to be a burden to you. I don't want to stay here and ruin your life. Ethan's heart sank as he listened to her. He had no idea she felt this way, that she thought she was somehow ruining his life. Maya, no, Ethan said, his voice firm but gentle. You're not a burden to me. You're not ruining my life. You are a part of this family, and you always will be. Maya shook her head, still unable to fully believe him. But I don't belong here, she said quietly. I'm just some girl who doesn't have a family, doesn't have anything. Ethan turned to face her, taking her hands in his. You belong here, Maya. You belong in this family, he said, his voice full of sincerity. I know it might be hard to believe, but I want you here. I want you to feel like you're part of something. You have every right to be here, and I'm not going to let you go. Not now, not ever. Maya looked up at him, her eyes full of uncertainty, but there was a flicker of hope there too. It wasn't much, but it was something. Do you really mean that? She asked, her voice trembling. Ethan smiled, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. I do, he said. You're my family now, Maya. And that means something. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him, but it was hard. It was so hard to let go of the fear that one day, everything would be taken from her again. But in that moment, with Ethan sitting beside her, holding her hands, Maya knew that maybe, just maybe, she could start to let go of that fear. Maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that she had found a place where she truly belonged. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You don't have to thank me, Ethan said, his voice warm and reassuring. This is what family is for. Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of relief, of finally feeling like she had a place, a home, and someone who cared enough to make sure she stayed there. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she could breathe. She didn't have to be afraid anymore. She didn't have to fight to survive every day. She had a family now, and that family, Ethan, wasn't going anywhere. I thought I had everything figured out, Ethan mused as he sat at the dining table, staring out the large bay window. The view of the city skyline stretched out before him, the lights twinkling in the distance. But for the first time in years, he found himself unsure of what to do next. Maya had become a part of his life in a way he never expected. She had brought warmth, laughter, and even a sense of purpose back into his world. But there was something he had been avoiding, something he knew would eventually surface. The past. The life he had built before Maya came into it. It was hard to deny that his world had been sterile, empty, filled with achievements, but lacking any real meaning. He had built his empire, but it had cost him everything that mattered. Now, with Maya, in his life, he felt like he had to start over. It wasn't just about being there for her, giving her a home. It was about figuring out how to truly be a family. He hadn't expected it to be so complicated. As the days passed, the unease in his chest only grew. Maya was becoming more comfortable in the house, and yet he could see the subtle cracks in her facade. She still held back, still kept part of herself hidden. It was as though she was waiting for something bad to happen, waiting for the inevitable moment when she would be sent away. Ethan couldn't help but wonder if it was because she didn't believe in the stability he was offering her. She had never had anything stable, not in her short life. Are you going to tell her soon? His assistant, Claire, asked one afternoon as they walked through the kitchen. Ethan looked up, startled. Tell her what? The truth, Claire said, her voice quiet. She doesn't know, does she? Ethan sighed and sat down at the table. No, he admitted. I haven't told her yet. I don't know how. Claire sat down across from him, her expression softening. You don't think she'll understand? I'm not sure I understand it myself, Ethan said, his voice tinged with frustration. She's been through so much. She deserves to know everything. But how can I tell her? How can I explain the things I've done, the mistakes I've made. Claire didn't answer at first, but after a moment, she said, "You're not perfect, Ethan. None of us are. But Maya doesn't need perfection. She needs honesty. She needs to know that you're real, that you're not some fairy tale idea of a father. She needs to know that you're willing to be there, even if you don't have all the answers." Ethan nodded slowly. Claire was right, of course. But still, the weight of the truth hung heavily on him. He knew that sooner or later, Maya would have to know about the life he had lived before she came into it. She would have to understand who he was, who he had been. But how could he ask her to accept that? "I don't know if I can do this," he said softly. "I don't know if I can be the father she needs me to be." "You already are," Claire said, her voice steady. "You've been here for her. You've given her a home. That's more than most people ever get." Ethan looked out the window, his mind racing. He had always been able to control everything. His business, his future, his life. But with Maya, it was different. She had entered his world like a force of nature, turning everything upside down, and he couldn't control that. He didn't want to. The truth was, he was afraid. Afraid of failing her, afraid of making the same mistakes he had made in the past. He had never been given the opportunity to make a family, to truly care for someone. But now, with Maya, he had that chance. He couldn't let fear stand in the way. The next evening, after dinner, Ethan found Maya sitting on the porch, her knees pulled to her chest, staring out into the dark. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat down beside her. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked gently. Maya looked up at him, her expression guarded, but she nodded. "Of course." Ethan took a deep breath, unsure of where to begin. This was it. The moment he had been dreading, the moment he had been avoiding for weeks. "I need to tell you something," he began. "Something about me, about my past." Maya tilted her head slightly, her brow furrowing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice quiet. Ethan hesitated. "Before you came here, before you came into my life, I wasn't the person I am now," he said slowly. "I made mistakes. A lot of mistakes. I spent so much time focusing on building my business, on building an empire, that I lost sight of everything else. I lost sight of what really mattered." Maya didn't say anything, but Ethan could see the curiosity in her eyes, the faint glimmer of understanding starting to form. "I wasn't always the best person. I didn't care about the things I should have cared about. But when you came here, when you came into my life, it changed everything." Maya looked at him, her expression softening. "You don't have to explain yourself to me," she said quietly. "I don't need you to be perfect." Ethan smiled, feeling the weight of the moment lift off his shoulders. "I know," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "But I needed you to know the truth. Because I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Maya didn't say anything at first, but after a long pause, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad you're here, too." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He had been so afraid of this moment, so afraid of revealing the truth to her. But now that it was out in the open, it didn't feel as heavy as he thought it would. Maya was right. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be there. And that was enough. "I still can't believe this is happening," Maya thought as she walked through the house, her sneakers softly tapping on the wooden floors. It had been a couple of weeks since the conversation with Ethan, the one where he had finally opened up about his past, about the man he had been before she came into his life. She had never imagined someone like him could be so vulnerable, so real, and in a way, it had made her feel closer to him. More than just the man who had given her a place to stay, he had shown her that he truly cared. But even with all the changes, there was still a part of Maya that held back. The weight of her past still hung on her, the scars that no one could see but that she carried with her every day. She had spent so long fighting just to survive, just to make it through each day, that trusting someone else felt like an impossible task. But with Ethan, something felt different. Maybe, for the first time, she could let go of that fear. The sound of Ethan's voice calling out to her broke her thoughts. "Maya, come on, we're getting ready to leave." Maya smiled slightly as she turned toward him. He was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, a backpack slung over his shoulder and a big grin on his face. "Where are we going?" she asked, crossing the room to join him. "You'll see," he replied, his grin widening. Maya had never been to a place like this before, and she didn't know what to expect. They had spent so much time in the house, getting used to their new routine, that she hadn't thought about going anywhere else. Ethan had been working a lot lately, handling business matters, and Maya had been doing her best to settle in. But now, as they headed out the door, something in the air felt different. As they walked down the street, Ethan kept the conversation light, asking Maya about school and what she had been up to. He had never really asked her about her life before coming to stay with him, and Maya had never really talked about it, not in any real way. It was too painful, too raw. But today, something felt like it was about to change. She had gotten used to the idea of having a family, of having someone who cared. But there was always the fear that she didn't belong, that this wasn't really her life. As they turned the corner, Maya saw what Ethan had been keeping secret, a small community center tucked away in a corner of their neighborhood. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Ethan smiled, his eyes lighting up. "This is where we're going today," he said. "I signed us up for an art class." Maya's eyes widened. "An art class?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "You've been here for a while now, and I thought it would be good for you to try something new. Plus, I know you like to draw." Maya froze for a moment. She hadn't really drawn in years. It felt like another lifetime ago, before everything had gone wrong. But the thought of it, of having a space where she could just create, where she wouldn't be judged, felt strangely comforting. "I don't know," she said, her voice uncertain. "I'm not sure I'm good enough." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. "You don't have to be good enough, Maya. This isn't about being perfect. It's about having fun and expressing yourself. And I'll be there with you." Maya looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity there. It wasn't just about the art class. It was about him wanting to help her discover something new, to help her let go of the past. Maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that she didn't have to hide behind walls anymore. She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." They walked inside the community center, and the warmth of the space enveloped them. There were other people there, adults and kids alike, all gathered around tables, some sketching, some painting. Maya felt a wave of nerves wash over her. This was different. She was different. She had spent so many years being self-conscious, too afraid to show anyone what she was capable of. But today, she felt a little lighter. Ethan led her to a table near the back, and they sat down. A woman in her 40s, who appeared to be the instructor, smiled warmly at them. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Miss Roberts. I'm glad you both could join us today. No experience necessary. Just have fun and enjoy the process." Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The table in front of her was covered in blank sheets of paper, colorful pencils, and paints. Ethan leaned over to her, whispering, "Just relax. We're here to have fun, remember?" Maya smiled, her nerves slowly starting to fade. She picked up a pencil and started to sketch a simple shape, something she could handle. And as the lines came together, she felt the tension leave her body, like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in a long time, she was doing something just for herself. Ethan, sitting across from her, was sketching as well. They exchanged occasional glances, both of them smiling quietly, sharing this small moment together. Maya's heart was still heavy with the remnants of her past, but today, here, in this space, she felt something new, a sense of belonging. The class went on for an hour, and by the end, Maya had a finished sketch. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. As they packed up their things, Ethan turned to her, his eyes filled with pride. "See? That wasn't so bad, was it?" Maya smiled, her eyes brighter than they had been in a while. "No, it wasn't bad at all." As they left the community center and headed back to the house, Maya felt a sense of calm settle over her. It wasn't just the art class. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she had found her place in this world. And with Ethan by her side, she didn't have to face it alone. "I'm starting to understand it now," Maya thought as she sat in the quiet living room, the soft hum of the house filling the space around her. It had been several weeks since that first day Ethan had brought her into his home, since she'd started to open up to him about the things that weighed on her. And while it still felt strange to be here, to have a place that was hers, something inside her was beginning to settle. She was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, she belonged. The sound of the front door opening interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to see Ethan stepping inside, shaking off the rain from his coat. He smiled at her as he closed the door behind him. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm. "You doing all right?" Maya smiled back, but there was still a small part of her that held back. It wasn't that she didn't trust Ethan. She did, more than anyone she had ever known. But she had spent so many years not letting anyone in, not letting anyone get close enough to hurt her, that it was hard to shake that instinct. Yeah, she replied, her voice quieter than usual. Just thinking. Ethan walked over and sat down beside her, sensing the weight in her words. You sure? He asked gently. You know you can talk to me about anything. Maya hesitated, then nodded, looking down at her hands. It's just, I've been here for a while now, and it still feels like I'm waiting for something to go wrong. Like maybe this isn't really my life. Ethan's expression softened as he listened. He had known Maya was carrying something with her, but hearing her put it into words made his heart ache. He had tried to offer her everything, a safe space, a home, a future, but he knew it wouldn't be enough if she didn't believe in it herself. Maya, he began, his voice steady. I'm not going anywhere. I told you, you're part of this family now. You're not going to lose that. Maya's eyes flickered up to meet his. She saw the sincerity there, the quiet assurance that he meant what he was saying. And for a moment, she felt the walls inside her begin to crack, just a little. She had been so afraid for so long, afraid that everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for, would disappear. But maybe, just maybe, she was ready to let go of that fear. I'm scared, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I'm scared that one day, I'll mess it up, or that you'll see that I don't belong here. Ethan's heart broke for her. He could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that had been with her for so long, and he knew that it wasn't something he could just fix with words. But he could show her, he could prove to her that she did belong here, that she had a place with him. Maya, listen to me, he said, his voice firm but gentle. You belong here. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, least of all to me. I want you here. You're not a burden, you're not a mistake, and I'm not going to let you slip away from me. Maya swallowed hard, the lump in her throat thickening. She wanted so badly to believe him, to trust him completely, but she had spent so much time alone, fighting her way through the world, that it was hard to imagine it could really be this simple. But what if you regret it? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. What if one day you realize you don't need me here anymore? Ethan shook his head, his eyes never leaving hers. I won't regret it. And I'm not going to change my mind. You're part of this family now, Maya. And that's not going to change. The words settled between them, warm and real, like a promise that she wasn't sure she was ready to accept. But in that moment, with Ethan sitting beside her, she could feel something shifting inside her. Maybe it wasn't going to happen all at once. Maybe she wouldn't wake up tomorrow and feel completely different. But for the first time, she didn't feel so alone. I'm not going anywhere, okay? Ethan said again, his voice soft. And you're not either. Maya nodded, though a part of her still felt like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But that part of her was smaller now, quieter, like it knew that maybe, just maybe, she was finally starting to believe that this life, this family, was hers to keep. The days that followed were filled with small moments that helped Maya start to feel at home. Ethan continued to be patient with her, giving her space when she needed it and encouraging her when she hesitated. She helped him with chores around the house, learning new things like how to cook meals together and even starting to pick out things to decorate her room. Slowly but surely, the walls that Maya had built around herself began to come down, piece by piece. And while it wasn't perfect, and it didn't happen overnight, she could feel herself growing more comfortable, more sure of the place she had in this house, in this family. One night, as they sat down for dinner together, Maya looked around the table at Ethan and felt a warmth fill her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. She had a family now, and she was beginning to believe that it was real, that it wasn't going to disappear. She was home. I still feel like I don't deserve this, Maya thought, staring at the ceiling as the quiet of the night settled around her. She was lying on her bed, the soft glow of the lamp beside her casting a warm light across the room. It was hard to believe that only a few months ago, she had been in a completely different world, a world where she had to fight for every scrap, every moment of peace. And now, here she was, in Ethan's home, a place that felt like it was finally starting to be hers. Still, no matter how much time passed, that voice inside her, the one that told her she didn't belong, wouldn't go away. It was small now, quieter than before, but it still lingered. She wondered if she would ever truly believe that this life, this safety, was real. She had been abandoned so many times before, hurt in ways that made it hard to trust that anyone would actually stay. It was easier to believe that someday it would all come crashing down. But lately, something had changed. Maya had started to see more of Ethan's world, more of the man behind the father figure he was becoming in her life. He had his own battles, his own scars, just like she did. And even though he never talked about them, she could see it in the way he carried himself. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. They had moments, small moments, where they could laugh together, where they would talk about things that weren't heavy, where they could just be. That, she realized, was part of what made it real. But even as she tried to shake off the uncertainty, she couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was still missing. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Maya, Ethan's voice called from the other side. You in there? Yeah, she said softly, sitting up and brushing her hair out of her face. Come in. The door opened, and Ethan stepped inside, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa in his hands. I thought you might want some, he said with a small smile, walking over and setting the cups down on the nightstand. Maya smiled back, feeling the warmth from the cocoa spread through her chest. Thanks, she said, picking up the cup and taking a sip. You okay? Ethan asked, sitting down on the edge of her bed. Maya hesitated. I don't know, she said softly. I feel like I'm starting to get comfortable here, but then part of me wonders if it's just going to go away. I don't know if I can handle it if it does. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. I get it, he said quietly. You've been through a lot, Maya, and I'm not asking you to forget about any of it. But I want you to know that you're not going anywhere. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Maya looked up at him, her heart tightening in her chest. But what if I mess it all up? What if I screw it up, like I've done with everything else? Maya, Ethan said gently, turning to face her fully. You're not going to mess this up. We're in this together. I'm not going to just give up on you. His words hung in the air, settling around them like a promise. Maya looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of everything she had been carrying for so long. She had been so afraid of letting anyone in, so afraid of trusting anyone, because she didn't want to be hurt again. But Ethan's words made something shift inside her, a quiet release. Maybe, just maybe, she could let go of that fear. But what if I'm not what you need? Maya asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I can't be the daughter you want me to be? Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes soft. Maya, you don't have to be anyone other than who you are, he said, his voice steady. I'm not looking for someone perfect. I'm looking for you. Just you. Maya felt a lump form in her throat, the tears threatening to spill over. She had been so afraid for so long, afraid of not being enough, afraid of being too much. But here, with Ethan, she didn't have to be anything other than herself. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be the person you think I am. Ethan smiled, his voice filled with warmth. You don't have to know. You don't have to have all the answers. We'll figure it out as we go. The only thing I need from you is to keep being yourself. That's all. Maya sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of his words settling into her chest. She had spent so much time wondering if she was worthy of this, of a place where she could just be, but now, in this moment, it didn't feel like something she had to prove. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be someone else. She could just be Maya, and that, she realized, was enough. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes softening. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. For not giving up on me. Ethan reached over and gently took her hand in his. I'm never going to give up on you, Maya, he said, his voice full of certainty. I promise you that. Maya smiled, feeling the last of her doubts begin to fade away. For the first time, she truly believed that this was real, that she was safe, that she had a place here. She didn't have to be afraid anymore. And for the first time, she wasn't carrying the weight of her past alone. She had Ethan, and he had her. That was enough. I thought everything was finally settling down, but the world had a way of shifting unexpectedly. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her coffee mug, her mind lost in thought. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that made her feel a little more alone than usual. She had been with Ethan for a while now, and even though every day seemed to get a little easier, something in her gut still told her that trouble was coming. Ethan had been acting a little distant lately, not in the way that he was pulling away, but in the way he looked like he was carrying the weight of something. He had always been the type to wear his emotions on his sleeve, and she could tell that he was hiding something. It wasn't like Ethan to keep things from her, not after everything they had been through together, but she knew him well enough to understand that he was struggling with something. Maya wasn't sure if it was the pressure of everything that had happened or something from his past that was resurfacing, but whatever it was, she could feel the tension in the air. "Maya, you okay?" Ethan's voice pulled her out of her thoughts, and she looked up to find him standing in the doorway, his brow furrowed in concern. He had been at work all day, and his usual easy smile was replaced with a look of weariness. "Yeah," she said softly, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." Ethan didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press the issue. He walked over to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter. "I know I've been a little off lately," he said after a beat, his voice quiet. "I'm sorry." Maya set her mug down and looked at him, her heart aching at the sight of him looking so vulnerable. She had never seen him this way, and it scared her a little. "What's going on?" she asked gently. Ethan hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the window as though the answers were hidden somewhere in the distance. "There's something I've been trying to avoid," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Something that I haven't told you about. It's not easy for me to say, but I think you deserve to know." Maya's pulse quickened, her heart racing as she tried to process what he was saying. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair as if he were trying to gather his thoughts. "Before you came into my life, I was lost," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I built this empire, this life of success and wealth, but I did it at the expense of everything else. My marriage fell apart, my family became distant, and I shut myself off from the world." Maya listened carefully, her mind struggling to keep up with the depth of what he was saying. She had always known that Ethan had a complicated past, but hearing it from him, hearing the raw emotion in his voice, made her realize just how much he had been hiding. "But that's not the worst part," Ethan continued, his voice growing softer. "The worst part is that I pushed away the people who cared about me. People like Ruth." Maya's heart stopped. She had heard Ethan mention Ruth a few times before, but she never understood the significance of her name. "Ruth?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded, his eyes distant as he thought about her. "She was like family to me," he said quietly. "She worked for me for years, taking care of the house, taking care of me. And when things started to fall apart, she was the one who held it all together. But I was too blind to see it. I pushed her away too." Maya's mind raced, trying to piece together what Ethan was telling her. Ruth had been the one person who had always been there for him, who had cared for him when he couldn't care for himself, and Ethan had pushed her away. "I never told you this, Maya," Ethan said, his voice filled with regret. "But Ruth was the one who convinced me to take you in. She saw something in you, something I didn't see in myself. She knew that you needed someone, that you needed a home, and she wanted me to be that person for you." Maya's heart ached at the weight of his words. She had never realized the depth of the connection between Ethan and Ruth, how much she had influenced his decision to open up his home to her. She had always thought that Ethan had done it out of the goodness of his heart, but now she understood that it was more than that. It was Ruth's legacy, her faith in him, that had led him to make the decision that changed both their lives. "But Ruth," Maya started, her voice trembling. "Is she okay?" Ethan's face hardened, his jaw tightening as he struggled to find the words. "She passed away a few months ago," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never had a chance to tell her how much she meant to me. And now I feel like I'm failing her by not being the person she believed I could be." The room seemed to close in on Maya as the weight of his words hit her. She had never known the depth of Ethan's loss, the burden he carried with him every day. But now, sitting in the quiet of the house, she understood just how much he had been holding in. "You're not failing her," Maya said softly, her voice filled with conviction. "You're here. You've opened up your life to me, and that's more than I could ever ask for. Ruth saw something in you, and I see it too. You're not alone in this, Ethan. I'm here with you." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Maya," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Maya reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to worry about that," she said, her voice steady. "We're in this together." And for the first time, she truly believed it. Together, they could face anything. "I had thought things were finally falling into place, But the sudden knock on the door shattered the fragile calm that had settled in the house. Maya had just finished her homework, the soft hum of the house around her, when the loud knock echoed from the front door. She froze, her heart pounding. She wasn't used to unexpected visitors. Ethan had stepped out earlier, saying he had a few errands to run, but something about the knock made her uneasy. It wasn't the usual casual sound of someone popping by. It was more insistent, urgent. Maya got up slowly, her feet dragging against the carpet, her stomach turning with anxiety. She reached for the door handle, hesitated for a moment, then opened it to reveal a man she had never seen before. His face was serious, his eyes scanning her for a moment before he spoke. "Is Ethan Caldwell home?" the man asked, his voice curt. Maya's stomach clenched as she nodded. "He's not here right now," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, though she felt a strange unease creeping up her spine. The man didn't seem satisfied with her answer. He stepped forward, his gaze flicking past her into the house. "Where is he?" he demanded, his tone shifting to something more forceful. "I don't know," Maya replied, taking a step back, her instincts telling her to be cautious. "He's out running errands. He'll be back soon." The man's expression hardened. "I need to speak with him," he said sharply. "It's important." Maya swallowed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing in on her. She didn't like the way this man was acting, too intense, too demanding. But she couldn't just shut the door in his face. "I can leave a message for him if you want," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. The man didn't seem to care much for her suggestion. "Tell him I'm here to collect on a debt he owes," he said, his words leaving a bitter taste in the air. "And tell him it's long overdue." Maya's eyes widened. Debt? Ethan had never mentioned owing anyone anything. Not like this. She tried to maintain control, but she could feel the walls closing in. "I'll tell him," she said, stepping back and pulling the door to a close, her mind racing. She didn't know who this man was or what kind of trouble Ethan had gotten himself into, but the sense of danger was palpable. As the door clicked shut, Maya leaned against it, trying to steady her breathing. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, and she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What had just happened? She didn't have long to process the interaction before she heard the sound of footsteps approaching from the driveway. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned to see Ethan walking up the front steps. His eyes locked onto hers, and he seemed to notice the tension in her posture immediately. "Maya, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice concerned. Maya opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know where to start, how to explain the fear she felt from the stranger at the door. "There was a man here," she said, her voice shaking. "He wanted to talk to you. He said something about a debt." Ethan's face darkened at the mention of the word debt. He stepped inside quickly, shutting the door behind him. "Who was it?" he asked, his voice tense. "I don't know," Maya replied, her eyes wide. "He didn't give his name. He just said you owed him something, that it was overdue." Ethan's expression hardened, and Maya could see the weight of the situation settle over him. He ran a hand through his hair, then looked down at her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite read. "Maya, listen to me," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "I need you to stay inside, all right? I'll handle this." Maya opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan cut her off before she could speak. "No arguments, Maya," he said, his voice unyielding. "This is something I need to take care of. You're safe here. Just stay inside." The way he said it made her pause. There was no room for discussion, no space for questions. He had made up his mind. He turned to leave, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Ethan," she called after him. He turned back, his face softening slightly. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice small. "Why is this happening?" Ethan paused for a moment, his gaze flickering with uncertainty. For a split second, Maya saw something in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable that he had never shown before. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by the calm, controlled exterior that Maya had come to know. "I'll explain everything when this is over," he said, his voice steady. "I promise." And with that, he turned and left. Maya stood by the door, staring at the spot where he had just been, the silence in the house pressing down on her. She didn't know what kind of trouble Ethan was in, but she knew one thing for sure. Things were about to change. As the minutes ticked by, Maya's mind raced, her thoughts spiraling. She had never been good at waiting. She had never been good at sitting still, especially when something didn't feel right. Her heart was heavy with worry, but she tried to push the fear aside. Ethan had promised her that she was safe, that he would take care of it. She just had to trust him. But as the minutes turned into an hour, and Ethan still hadn't returned, that trust began to waver. What was taking him so long? And what had this man meant by debt? Maya paced the living room, her thoughts going in circles, until the sound of the front door opening made her freeze. Ethan stepped inside, his expression grim, his clothes disheveled as though he had been in a hurry. "It's done," he said, his voice low. "You don't have to worry about it anymore." Maya's stomach twisted with unease. What happened? Who was he? Ethan shook his head, his jaw tight. "I'll tell you everything, I promise," he said, his voice quieter now. "But not tonight." Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure if she could fully trust him yet. He had promised her safety, but she had a feeling that things were far from over. This was only the beginning. "I knew something was wrong when Ethan didn't come home until late into the night." The whole evening fell off, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't going to be as simple as they seemed. She had tried to keep herself busy, to focus on anything other than the pit of anxiety forming in her stomach, but it wasn't working. The clock on the wall ticked louder with every passing minute, and the silence in the house was becoming unbearable. Every few seconds, Maya glanced at the door, hoping to hear Ethan's footsteps or the sound of the front door opening. But it never came. She couldn't wait any longer. Her feet moved on their own, and before she knew it, she was standing by the door, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She knew she wasn't supposed to go outside, not without Ethan, but the worry in her chest was too strong. What if something had happened to him? What if the man who had come to the house was still out there, waiting for him? Without thinking, she stepped outside. The cool night air hit her like a wave, and the street was eerily quiet. Maya pulled her jacket tighter around her, trying to keep warm, but her heart was racing, each beat a reminder of how much she didn't know. As she walked down the street, her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of Ethan. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the pavement. She turned the corner, thinking she might check the nearby alleyway, when she heard a car approaching. Her heart skipped a beat as the headlights illuminated the road. Maya quickly stepped to the side, pressing her back against the wall. The car slowed as it neared, and she held her breath, praying it wasn't someone dangerous. But when the car came into view, her heart sank. It was Ethan's car. But it wasn't just Ethan in the car. There was a man with him, a tall figure with a stern look on his face, his eyes hidden in the darkness. Maya's pulse quickened. She could see that Ethan was sitting in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. Something wasn't right. The car came to a stop just a few feet from where she was standing. Ethan didn't even notice her at first. The man beside him said something, his voice low, but Maya couldn't make out the words. She could see Ethan nodding, his face tense. He didn't look like the same man she had been living with for the past few weeks. This man, sitting next to him, was dragging him into something deeper, something he hadn't told her about. Maya's heart raced as she stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence. "Ethan," she called out, the fear in her voice impossible to hide. Ethan's head snapped around, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw her standing there. He quickly put the car in park and opened the door, stepping out. "Maya, what are you doing out here?" he asked, his voice strained. "I couldn't wait any longer," she said, her voice trembling. "Who was that?" Ethan looked back at the man in the car, who had remained silent the whole time, his eyes watching Maya with an unreadable expression. He's someone I know," Ethan said slowly, as though carefully choosing his words. "He's someone from my past." Maya's stomach tightened. "What's going on, Ethan?" she asked, her voice soft but full of emotion. "Why didn't you tell me about him? Why are you hiding this from me?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, his face clouded with frustration. He glanced back at the man in the car, who was still watching them from a distance. Then, he turned back to Maya. "I didn't want you to get involved in this," he said quietly. "This is my mess, not yours." "What mess?" Maya asked, her voice rising now, desperation creeping in. "Who is he? What does he want from you?" Ethan took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair, looking at her with a pained expression. "He's part of the reason I built this life," Ethan said, his voice low, almost as if confessing something he had been carrying for years. "I got involved in things I shouldn't have, and now he's here to collect." He's here to make sure I pay the price for what I did. Maya felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her mind was racing, trying to process what he was saying. You've been hiding this from me? You've been hiding your past, Ethan? She asked, her voice shaking. I didn't want you to get involved in all this, he repeated, his voice strained. But you deserve to know. This isn't just about me. It's about the choices I made, the things I've done that I can't take back. Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion, hurt, and disbelief. I don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. I thought we were past this. I thought we were finally a family. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? Ethan stepped forward, his face softening. I was protecting you, Maya. I thought if I kept you away from all this, you wouldn't get hurt. But now I see how much it's been weighing on me, how much I've been keeping from you. And I'm sorry. Maya took a step back, her heart pounding. I don't know if I can handle this, Ethan, she whispered. I don't know if I can keep being here, in this house, in this life, if you're hiding things from me. Ethan's eyes filled with regret, and he stepped closer, his hand reaching out to her. I know it's a lot, he said, his voice thick. But I need you to trust me, Maya. I need you to believe that I'm doing everything I can to make things right. I'll protect you. I'll always protect you. But you need to know what's happening. You need to understand the consequences of my past. Maya looked at him, her heart torn between the man she had come to trust and the weight of the secrets that were starting to surface. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. Things were changing, and she was no longer in control. She had to decide whether she was willing to face this new reality, or if it was something too dark to be a part of. As Ethan's hand rested gently on her shoulder, Maya realized that she had to make a choice. But for now, she couldn't take another step without knowing the whole truth. I couldn't believe how quickly everything was changing. Maya sat in the living room, her hands resting in her lap, her mind spinning with everything Ethan had told her. It was only a few hours ago that he had opened up about his past, the debts, the people involved, the life he had tried so hard to bury. She had never imagined he was hiding so much, and now, with the weight of it all on her shoulders, she wasn't sure what to think. Ethan had promised her everything would be okay, that he was taking care of it, but the tension in his voice, the way he hesitated when he spoke about it, told her something was still wrong. The night had fallen quiet, but the air between them was heavy. Ethan had gone into his office to make a few calls, trying to handle things on his end. Maya could hear his muffled voice through the walls, but even though he was close, she still felt the distance between them. She thought about what he had said, about the man who had come to the house, about the debt that Ethan had been avoiding for so long. The realization hit her again. This was bigger than she had thought. She had always known there were things about Ethan's past that he wasn't ready to share, but she never imagined it would be something that could affect them both. What if this debt, this man who had been sent to collect, was just the beginning? What if there were more people involved? What if there were more secrets she hadn't heard yet? Maya got up from the couch and walked over to the window, looking out at the street. The moon was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the front yard. She could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. She had always been good at surviving, good at keeping her distance from danger. But now, she felt like she was standing at the edge of something she couldn't control. She had trusted Ethan with everything, and he had promised to protect her. But was that enough? The sound of footsteps approaching brought her back to reality, and she turned to see Ethan entering the room. His face was tight, his expression weary, and Maya could tell that the weight of whatever he was dealing with was still pressing on him. I've made arrangements, Ethan said, his voice low. It's going to be okay. They won't come after us again. Maya didn't know what to say. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he had everything under control. But there was a nagging feeling inside her that told her this wasn't over. She had seen the look in his eyes, the way he had spoken about the past. He was still carrying it with him, still trying to outrun it. Ethan, are you sure? Maya asked quietly, her voice trembling. Are you really sure it's going to be okay? Ethan walked over to her, his face softening as he reached out to take her hand. Maya, I'm doing everything I can to protect you, he said, his voice full of sincerity. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise. Maya looked at him, searching his eyes for any hint of doubt, but she couldn't find any. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that he had the strength to handle whatever was coming their way. But the reality was that she didn't know if they were ready for this, for whatever Ethan's past was going to bring to their doorstep. I know you're scared, Ethan continued, squeezing her hand. I'm scared too. But we have each other. We can face this together. Maya nodded, her heart still heavy. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face what lay ahead, but she knew that with Ethan beside her, she didn't have to do it alone. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What do we do next? Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze drifting toward the window. We move forward, he said quietly. We don't let the past control us. We take it one day at a time, together, and we protect each other, no matter what. Maya stood there for a moment, processing his words. She didn't know how they were going to get through this, but she knew that she had to trust Ethan, and she had to trust herself. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her now. I'm ready, she said, her voice stronger now. We'll face this together. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and pride. Together, he repeated, his voice steady. No matter what. They stood there for a moment, holding each other's gaze, both of them silently acknowledging the gravity of what they were about to face. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they would face it side by side. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt a spark of hope. Whatever the future held, they would get through it. Together. I never expected things to get this complicated. Maya sat in the kitchen, her eyes staring blankly at the table. The weight of the last few days was beginning to sink in. After Ethan had told her about the man who came to collect the debt, things had started to change, and not in ways she had anticipated. While Ethan had tried to reassure her that everything was under control, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. They had talked about moving forward, about facing whatever came next together, but Maya could feel the tension in the air. Ethan was carrying something heavier than he let on, and it wasn't just the past he was running from. Maya had seen how he reacted when they talked about the man, the way his eyes clouded over with fear. She knew that Ethan had his demons, but this felt like something even bigger than before. The house had been quiet since that conversation, and though Ethan had been doing his best to keep up appearances, Maya knew it was only a matter of time before whatever was lingering between them came to a head. As she sat there, trying to wrap her mind around everything, she heard the door creak open, and she instinctively turned toward the sound. Ethan walked in, his face a little pale, his movements stiff. Maya immediately stood up, a knot forming in her stomach. Ethan, she asked softly, her voice laced with concern. He gave her a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Hey, he said, his voice flat. How are you doing? Maya didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to him, her eyes scanning his face. There was something wrong. She could feel it. What happened? She asked quietly. Ethan hesitated for a moment, looking away from her gaze. Then he sighed, dropping his bag onto the couch and running a hand through his hair. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice low and reluctant. I didn't want to bring you into this, but I can't keep hiding it. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She felt a coldness creep into the room as the atmosphere shifted. What do you mean? She asked, her pulse quickening. Ethan took a deep breath, then turned to face her fully. The man who came here, the one I told you about, he started. He's part of something bigger. He's not just a guy with a debt. He's connected to people I thought I'd gotten away from. Dangerous people, Maya. Maya felt her stomach churn. Dangerous people? What had Ethan gotten himself into? Ethan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What are you talking about? Ethan ran a hand over his face, clearly torn, as though he were debating whether or not to tell her more. I've been involved in things I shouldn't have, he admitted, his voice strained. Years ago, I made some choices. Choices that put me in debt to the wrong people. They've been waiting for the right time to come back. Maya felt her throat tighten, the shock of his words making her dizzy. You never said anything, she said, her voice rising. You never told me about any of this. Why? Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? Ethan's face softened, and he stepped closer to her, his hands reaching out to her. I didn't want to drag you into my mess, Maya. I didn't want you to carry this burden with me. But I'm already here. Maya's voice broke. I'm already part of this, Ethan. You can't just keep things from me. We're supposed to be a family. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, his eyes pained. I know, he whispered. I know. I thought I could protect you from all of this, but I was wrong. Maya wiped her eyes, trying to keep the tears from falling. She felt so many things. Anger, betrayal, fear, but mostly, She felt small, like the foundation of everything they had built was slipping away. "I don't know what to do with this," she said, her voice trembling. "You've been lying to me, Ethan. All this time." Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand. "I'm not lying to you anymore, Maya," he said softly. "This is my fault. I should have told you sooner, but I was too scared. I'm still scared, but I can't keep pretending I've got it all figured out." Maya looked down at their hands, her mind racing with the weight of his words. She wanted to understand, wanted to believe him, but part of her was still afraid that all this talk of danger, of debt, would tear them apart. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath, then slowly shook his head. "I don't know," he said. "I'm doing everything I can to make sure you're safe. But this is bigger than I thought. And I can't promise you it'll all go away." Maya felt her heart sink as the reality of the situation set in. The past wasn't something that could just be left behind. It had a way of coming back, no matter how hard you tried to outrun it. She didn't know how to fix this, how to make everything right again. All she knew was that she couldn't do it alone. "I want to be here with you," she said quietly, looking up at him. "But I need to know you're not going to shut me out. I need to know we can face this together." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and regret. "I promise," he said softly. "We'll face it together. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it together." Maya didn't know if they could make it through what was coming, but for the first time, she truly believed that they had a chance. As the night stretched on, the weight of the conversation hung heavy in the air, but there was also something else, something that wasn't there before. Hope. A glimmer of hope that, with each other, they could face whatever lay ahead. I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen, that the calm they had found wasn't going to last. The days had passed since Ethan had admitted the depth of his past, and they had tried to move forward, tried to rebuild, but there was an undercurrent of unease that neither of them could ignore. Maya still couldn't quite trust that things wouldn't fall apart. Every time the phone rang, every time Ethan got a call, she found herself holding her breath, wondering if the next call would be from someone looking to collect the debt Ethan had tried so hard to outrun. Ethan had done his best to reassure her, but the weight of his past wasn't something that could be erased so easily. Despite his promises, Maya couldn't shake the thought that he was hiding something, that there was more to the story than he was letting on. It was a Sunday evening when it all came to a head. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Ethan had gone to check on something at work, and Maya had stayed behind, lost in her thoughts. She was sitting in the living room, a sketchbook in front of her, but the pencil in her hand felt heavy, like it didn't belong there. She couldn't focus on anything. She had tried to push the worries aside, but the fear kept creeping back. The doorbell rang, and for a moment, Maya froze. She didn't expect anyone. No one came by this late unless it was important. Her heart skipped a beat as she got up and walked toward the door. The moment she opened it, she knew something was wrong. The man who stood in front of her wasn't someone she recognized, but there was a familiarity to his presence that made her stomach tighten. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that seemed too formal for the time of day. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hardness to it, a coldness that made Maya's pulse quicken. "Is Ethan Caldwell here?" he asked, his voice sharp and authoritative. Maya took a step back, instinctively trying to put distance between them. "He's not home right now," she replied, her voice steady despite the unease flooding through her. "Who are you?" The man's eyes narrowed slightly, and he seemed to assess her for a moment before speaking again. "I'm here to see him. It's important." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "I told you he's not here." She was starting to feel uncomfortable, the need to close the door and lock it creeping into her mind. But she held herself steady, trying to act normal. "Do you want me to leave a message for him?" The man hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Tell him that it's time to settle things. It's been long enough." Maya's stomach dropped. The words were loaded with so much meaning, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something she wasn't prepared for. "I'll tell him," she said quietly, her hand already moving toward the door to shut it. The man nodded and stepped back slightly, allowing her to close it. Maya locked the door, her hand shaking slightly as she turned the deadbolt. She stood there for a moment, her mind racing. The mention of settling things left her with a gnawing sense of dread. Who was this man? What did he want with Ethan? And more importantly, what had Ethan not told her? Ethan was always so careful to protect her, but now, She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something even darker lurking in his past. He had promised to keep her safe, but the reality of it all was starting to feel impossible. Just then, the sound of the door unlocking interrupted her thoughts. Ethan was home. He stepped inside, his face tight with worry. He must have seen the look on her face because his expression softened immediately. "Maya," he said, his voice laced with concern. "What happened?" Maya didn't say anything at first. She just watched him, her heart pounding in her chest. The man. His words. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something was about to break. "There was a man here," she said finally, her voice trembling. Ethan froze. "A man? Who?" "I don't know," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "He said something about settling things. He looked like he meant business." Ethan's face went pale, his eyes flicking to the door before he shut it behind him. "What did he say exactly?" Maya repeated the words he had said, and Ethan's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. "This isn't good," he muttered under his breath. "Ethan, what's going on?" Maya asked, her voice desperate now. "Who is he?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his face filled with frustration. "He's from the people I've been trying to escape," he said, his voice low. "They've been waiting for me to pay back what I owe." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, what you owe? What have you gotten yourself into?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I got involved in some dangerous things a long time ago, things I thought I could outrun. But now, they're coming for me, and I can't protect you from it any longer." Maya shook her head, her mind racing. "What are you saying? You didn't tell me everything, did you? You've been hiding this from me, Ethan." "I didn't want you to get dragged into this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But the truth is, I've been living with this debt for years, and now, it's catching up to me. And you're caught in the middle of it." Maya felt the weight of his words, the truth settling into her chest like a lead balloon. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was about her too. And suddenly, all the safety she had felt in the house, in their little world, seemed so fragile. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice breaking. Ethan's eyes softened as he took her hand. "We face it together. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The words were comforting, but they didn't change the reality of the situation. Maya wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't the life she had imagined when she first stepped into Ethan's world. Things were about to get even harder. "I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was okay," Maya thought, her fingers gripping the edge of the kitchen counter as she stared out the window at the darkening sky. It had been a week since the conversation with Ethan about his past, about the people he had been running from. He had promised that they would face it together, that everything would be all right. But the weight of the uncertainty was beginning to feel like too much. Ethan had been distant the last few days, leaving early for work and coming home late. She understood that he had his own battles to fight, but she couldn't ignore the growing anxiety inside her. There was still a part of her that couldn't fully trust that everything was really going to be okay. The knocking on the door was sudden and unexpected, and Maya froze, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't been expecting anyone. Her heart raced as she glanced at the door, then at the clock. Ethan wasn't home yet. The knock came again, louder this time, and she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She didn't want to answer it, didn't want to face whatever was on the other side. But she knew she had no choice. With a deep breath, she walked slowly to the door, her hand shaking slightly as she reached for the handle. When she opened the door, she was met with the same man who had come before, the one Ethan had warned her about. The same man who had brought the unsettling news of debts and danger. He stood there, his face stoic, as if he had been waiting for her to open the door. His eyes were cold, and his posture was rigid. "Where is Ethan?" he asked, his voice demanding, almost impatient. Maya's stomach twisted, but she kept her composure. "He's not here right now," she replied, her voice firm. "I told you last time, I don't know where he is." The man didn't seem satisfied with her answer. He stepped forward, just slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're lying," he said, his voice lowering. "I know he's here, and I'm not leaving until I see him." Maya's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "I'm not lying," she said again, her voice steady. "Ethan is out. He'll be back soon, but I can't help you. I don't know anything about your business." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Maya thought he might push past her into the house. But instead, He took a step back and crossed his arms. I'm not here for small talk, he said coldly. I'm here to collect. Tell him I'll be back if I don't get my payments soon. With that, he turned and walked off, disappearing into the night before Maya could say anything else. She stood there, her heart still pounding in her chest. Who was he? What did he mean by payment? Ethan had promised her that everything was taken care of. But this man's visit only confirmed her worst fears. She didn't know what to do next. She couldn't just wait for Ethan to come home. She had to do something. Her instincts were screaming at her to act, to get ahead of whatever was coming. She couldn't just sit by and let this happen. Ethan had told her to trust him, to let him handle things. But how much longer could she wait for him to come through? She couldn't shake the thought that there was something bigger at play here, something more dangerous. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to protect herself, protect the life she was starting to build here. She couldn't let it fall apart just because of Ethan's past. Ethan didn't come home until later that night. When he stepped through the door, he looked tired, his face drawn, his eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and something darker, something Maya couldn't quite place. Maya, he said, his voice low, as though the weight of the world was pressing on him. I know what you're thinking. Maya didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the unspoken fear that had been there since the moment he opened up to her about his past. The man who came to the door, she said, her voice shaking slightly. He said something about payment. What's going on, Ethan? Why didn't you tell me everything? Ethan's expression hardened, and for a moment, Maya could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to protect her, she could tell. But he was also fighting something inside himself, something that he hadn't been able to shake. Maya, he said quietly, taking a deep breath. I didn't want to bring you into this. I wanted to keep you safe, away from the things I've done. But I can't keep hiding it from you. He paused for a moment, and Maya could see the fear in his eyes. The debt, it's not just about money. It's about power. People I've crossed, people who don't forget. Maya's heart sank. She had known that there was more to Ethan's past than he had told her, but hearing the truth, the full truth, was something else entirely. You're not safe, are you? She whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan looked at her, his face filled with regret. I don't know, Maya, but I swear to you, I'm doing everything I can to protect you. To protect us. Maya shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I can't keep living like this, she said. Softly. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. Ethan stepped forward, his hands reaching for her. Maya, please. I know it's a lot, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll get us through this, I swear. I won't let them hurt you. Maya looked at him, her heart torn. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that everything would be okay, that they could face whatever came next. But she also knew that she couldn't keep pretending that things weren't spiraling out of control. I need to know the truth, Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. All of it. No more secrets. Ethan nodded, his face grim. You're right, he said. And I'll tell you everything. But you need to know, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she nodded. She didn't know what was coming next, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't face it alone. And as much as she didn't want to, she was going to have to trust Ethan, whether she was ready or not. I'm not sure how to feel anymore, Maya thought as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. She could hear the sound of Ethan moving around the house, his footsteps heavy with the weight of whatever he had just uncovered. She had asked him for the truth, and he had given it to her. But now that she knew, the reality felt like a cold shadow looming over them. The debt, the people Ethan had once been involved with, everything had changed in an instant. Maya knew that this wasn't going to be easy, but she hadn't realized just how deep Ethan's past went, or how dangerous the people he had crossed really were. She had wanted the truth, but now that she had it, she was terrified. The door to her room creaked open, and she looked up to see Ethan standing there, his face tight with worry. Maya, he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of the conversation they had just had. We need to talk. Maya nodded, trying to keep her emotions in check. I know, she said quietly. Ethan walked into the room and sat down beside her. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Maya could feel the tension between them, thick in the air, like something that couldn't be ignored. Ethan was the one to break the silence. I never wanted you to know any of this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I couldn't keep lying to you. I thought I could protect you from it all, but it's too late for that now. Maya looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, her voice trembling. Why didn't you trust me enough to share everything? Ethan's expression softened, his eyes filled with regret. I didn't want you to get hurt, he said. I thought I could fix everything before it affected you. But I was wrong. I should have told you from the beginning. Maya shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't understand, Ethan. How could you think you could just hide this from me? We're in this together. I've always been here for you. Why didn't you believe that? Ethan reached out, taking her hand gently in his. I'm sorry, Maya. I didn't mean to push you away. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I've learned that I can't. I need you, and I need your trust. Maya looked down at their hands, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that everything would be okay, but the fear in her chest wouldn't go away. What happens now? She whispered. What do we do? Ethan sighed, his thumb rubbing over her hand in a gentle, reassuring motion. We face this together, he said firmly. I don't know what's coming, but I do know that we can get through it if we stick together. I'll protect you, Maya, no matter what. Maya looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt, but there was none. He was determined, unwavering in his promise to protect her. And for the first time since she had learned the truth, she believed him. Okay, she said softly, her voice steady. We'll face it together. The air between them lightened, just a little, but Maya knew they still had a long road ahead. There were still so many questions, so many things left unsaid, but for the first time, she felt like they could face whatever was coming. Ethan stood up, pulling her into a tight hug. I'm not going anywhere, Maya, he whispered. We'll figure it out. Together. As he held her, Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her, just for a moment. She had been living in fear for so long, afraid of losing everything. But in that moment, she realized something. She had never truly been alone. Not as long as Ethan was by her side. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but they were also filled with small moments of reassurance. Ethan kept his promise, working tirelessly to deal with the debt and the people involved. He kept Maya informed, told her everything he knew, even when it was hard. And slowly, she could feel the weight on both of their shoulders starting to lift. It wasn't over yet, but with every day that passed, they were one step closer to being free of it. Ethan was taking care of things, but Maya was learning to take care of herself, too. She wasn't just sitting on the sidelines, waiting for things to happen. She was standing beside him, helping him through it, facing their challenges together. The man who had come to their door, the one who had demanded payment, hadn't returned. Ethan had made sure of it. But Maya knew that this wasn't the end. There were still people out there, still threats to face. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Not as long as she had Ethan. And as the days turned into weeks, they both started to rebuild. It wasn't a perfect process. There were moments of doubt, moments when the fear crept in. But they had each other. And that, Maya realized, was the most important thing of all. They were stronger together. And for the first time, Maya felt like she could breathe again. They were facing the future, side by side, and nothing could break them apart. As the months passed, things slowly began to settle. The fear, the tension, the uncertainty, they were still there, lurking in the background, but they weren't as overwhelming as they once were. Ethan had worked tirelessly to get his past under control, to rid himself of the debts that had haunted him for so long. And while they both knew it wasn't over completely, there was a sense of peace in their lives now. Maya had never imagined that she would feel this way. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. The fear that had once clung to her like a second skin was starting to loosen its grip, and she realized that it was because of the life she had built here, with Ethan, with the family they were creating. Ethan had kept his promise. He had faced the past head-on, and in doing so, he had shown her that no matter how dark things got, they could face it together. They had their ups and downs, their moments of doubt, but each time they overcame something, they grew stronger. Maya smiled as she sat on the porch, the cool evening breeze brushing her hair away from her face. It had been a long time since she'd felt this calm, this grounded. The sun was setting in the distance, casting a golden glow over everything. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at home. Ethan walked out onto the porch, a soft smile on his face as he joined her. He sat down beside her, his arm brushing against hers. You all right? He asked, his voice filled with warmth. Maya nodded, her smile widening. Yeah, just thinking. Ethan chuckled, turning his head to look at her. What are you thinking about? Everything, she said, her eyes flicking to the horizon. About how far we've come, about how much we've been through. It's crazy, right? I never thought we'd be here. Ethan's gaze softened, and for a moment, they both just sat in the comfortable silence, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. I never thought I'd get here either, he said quietly. But I'm glad we are. I'm glad you're here. Maya looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. Me too. She didn't need to say more. They both knew the journey they had been on. They both understood the weight of what they had faced and how far they had come because of it. Ethan took her hand in his fingers brushing against hers in a tender, familiar gesture. There's still a lot we don't know, Maya, he said softly. But as long as we're together, we'll figure it out. Maya squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his words sink into her. Together, she echoed. We'll face whatever comes next together. The days ahead were uncertain, but in that moment, Maya knew something. For sure, no matter what challenges they would face, she was no longer afraid. She had a family. She had Ethan. And together, they could face anything. The world outside still had its dangers, its dark corners that they would have to navigate. But Maya had learned one important thing. She wasn't alone anymore. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of purple and gold, Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't know what the future held, but with Ethan by her side, she was ready to face it. Together, they could conquer anything.